Hello and welcome to a quick tutorial on some custom code blocks for Classy that I've created and posted to robobogan.com. If you haven't been here before, you can check out my blog. I've got articles on different things and several articles about Classy campaign layouts, custom code templates for Classy that we can use to create custom layouts. You can see multi-column layouts, two-thirds column layouts that are different sizes, things like that. Today we're going to talk about this one over here, posted on May 4th, Advanced Classy Layouts Part 2, Event Hero Section with Custom Button. If you click into that blog post, you'll see a breakdown of some details about that template, things you'll want to know. It actually walks through some of the individual code blocks, so we're going to look at this as a whole template today and actually build one out within Classy. So let's get started. First thing we're going to do is we're going to pop over to Classy and we're going to have this campaign set up. Now, when you do a custom code template for the hero block, let me scroll back up and show you this preview. You want to make sure that you only do this custom code block for the hero on an event campaign type. You don't want to do an event with fundraising, and you don't want to do this custom campaign code template for an event, for a peer-to-peer event. The reason why a peer-to-peer campaign and event with fundraising don't work with this template is because the whole purpose of this template is to eliminate the second button, the fundraising button, from the events registration hero area up here. Okay, let's dive into Classy. So we're going to open up a Classy campaign like this one. Just made a demo campaign real quick for us. And then I've actually already got the code template in here. We're going to dive into the code separately, but I'm going to show you what it looks like in Classy real quick, and then we can actually walk through the code piece by piece. When you're in Classy, this is under the pages and then landing page layout. You want to go to the design tab over here, because if you notice, if you click on this section up here, we can't actually edit it. There's no custom code block coming up. And the only way to edit that is to hit this design tab on the top right. So once you click that design tab, you'll see the content blocks change over here. And you can see a custom code block in your hero here. If you don't have a custom code block loaded yet, now's the time to do it. So come down here and add content to page, hit custom and drag that up here. And you can put it above or below your hero. It doesn't really matter. We're going to turn the default hero off, because if we turn this back on, you'll notice it has that reservation button, but also that donation button that we're trying to hide. So we're going to turn that hero off. We will need it later though, and you can't actually delete it because it's a default block for this campaign type. But once you're under the design tab, when you click on a custom block like this, it'll open up the custom block itself. You can also click on the custom block here to edit it. I prefer to click over here in the design tab because it lets me really notice and see what I'm clicking on. There's no names on the custom blocks over here, so it's hard to remember which custom block is which. In this case, obviously our hero is further up the page, so it's this one, but I like to click over here because it makes it easier. Once you click on that, you're going to go ahead and paste your HTML here and your CSS under this tab here, and then we're going to go and walk through that code piece by piece in a moment. The important three things to remember on this section, though, are that the markup tab is for HTML. The CSS tab is for CSS only. So in the template, there is going to be a section with CSS, but it's going to be surrounded by a little bit of HTML that sets it off as a CSS style block. And you want to make sure you don't include the style block here. So what you don't want to see is this section beginning with style, like that. You don't want to see that, and you don't want to see that at the end either. Down here, end style, like this. If you've copied the custom code block template into your template, into your Classy instance, and you see this error, your CSS could not be processed, it's because your syntax is wrong. In this case, we've got a style tag, which is an HTML tag, which should be under markup, but we've got that under the CSS section. Now, likewise, if we were to copy this whole entire thing, now that we've got the HTML tags around the CSS, this is technically a block of HTML code. But if we came over here to the HTML markup side and pasted it here, and then saved the page, Classy would automatically wipe the style tags out because they automatically do that. They wipe out anything they don't recognize. They wipe out JavaScript, jQuery, any of that kind of stuff. You can't put scripts in here. You can't put CSS tags in here. The only thing you can put in here is HTML. And so the CSS belongs in the CSS tab, but you got to make sure you don't include those HTML tags for the style. So that's an important thing to remember. And the third thing to remember, let's delete those tags real quick so it doesn't give us that error. Okay, so the important thing here is that you've got your HTML and your CSS, and then the third thing is the background image. So you'll notice here there's a background image on this block. Now I tried originally to put a background image. You'll notice this little CSS style tag here, class. I tried to put the background image through the CSS and put it in here, but it actually made more sense to just do it through the Classy page builder. And so you just upload your background image to here, and it will upload to this section. What size your background image is really depends on how tall you want this section to be. I think right now we're working with like a 1500 by 1000 pixel image, so it's 1500 pixels across and 1000 pixels tall. That tends to give us enough of an image, large enough image, that we can do the cover in fixed position down here that we like to do, but also without letting it be so big that it's taking up too much data and it's using too much data. So it's a nice size for a cover image like this. Okay, so that's the code block. Those are the basic things in Classy that we're going to do. So we're going to jump over to the HTML and we're going to modify the actual code sections in here. And the reason we're jumping over into a code editor is because although Classy's markup tab does give us some color coding here, it's a little bit easier to see when you have a full screen of code instead of just this little window over here on the side. So I like to edit my code in something like Adobe's Visual Studio Code is what I'm currently using. I used to use Brackets, but they've discontinued that product. Technically, you could edit code in a plain text editor, not Microsoft Word, but a plain text editor like Notepad or something like that could also work. But those are hard because they don't color code the code, and so it's harder to see where you're at when you're in something that's not color coded. Visual Studio Code is free. It's from Adobe. I highly recommend that product. It's a pretty easy install, and it works pretty well. So let's go ahead and jump over to the Visual Studio Code and take a look at the code itself. Okay, here we are in Visual Studio Code. Now notice that you have a lot of green text here, you have a lot of different blue text and different colors popping around. You want to make sure that you understand this. If you're new to HTML, go ahead and hold tight and try not to get overwhelmed by the code. Just note that anything that starts with this little tag here, those are HTML notes, and so if you were to copy that into Classy, Classy does honor the code. It doesn't wipe that code out when you save the page, but it won't show it because it's an HTML note and not a text to be written onto the page. So there's two parts to this template, basically. You got the HTML code here, signified by this note here, and then that's the HTML block that goes in your markup tab, and then you have the CSS styles here, inside that style tag. So in order to write them in the HTML document, I have to put them in this style tag. But what we need is in between them. So we need this section all the way down to here for our styles. All that content is going to go into your CSS tab. So we'll do that in a minute, but let's take a walk through this actual document and look at each line of code and see what it does, and just note where to make changes in order to see them show up on the front end of your page. Now real quickly, I prefer to see a Classy campaign that has an image title. I think image titles work better on Classy pages. They look nicer. The generic text titles within a Classy fundraising campaign or event campaign or whatever, they're not bad, obviously. They work fine, but they're just not as elegant, and they don't quite bring as much of a element of branding and uniqueness to your page. So I prefer to have a hero title that's an image. In this case, we've uploaded an image already for this event. So I've copied that into this code here. This isn't part of the template. You're going to have to come up with your own title images if you want to put a title image. If you don't want to put a title image, you just have to remove this image class here, this image tag. Just don't use this at all. And you can use this heading 2 instead if you want. You can change this to a heading 1 if you want to have a larger text. And you can define all those styles down here for heading 1 and heading 2, things like that. You can decide what those look like later on. That's really up to you if you want to do it that way. But in our case, we're going to do an image. And the template by default comes with this placeholder.com 750 by 250 PNG image. It just shows up as a gray square on the page when the page is rendered with this code. And so it'll be a placeholder image. You can go ahead and replace that source with the source of your image. In this case, we're going to replace it with this code here. This image source is from our title graphic for this event. So we're going to delete what's in between these two quotation marks and then put in our title. Okay, so that updates the code to include our image for the image title. Now, I know for a fact that our image is probably going to fit in that 700 pixel wide section, but if we need to adjust that, we can change the width of the image here at the 700 pixels. Okay, below that we have a few different things. We have some titles. We've got some, so here we can adjust things like this, and we can put in event details if we wanted to. For example, we could say, you know, Tuesday, November 8th, 2022, whatever. We can delete some of this information that I've put in here by default just to put my website on there. You can put, this can be your description of your event, so you could say like, describe the event here. It's a fun event. Okay. And you don't have to have a heading 2 title heading. You don't have to have that there if you don't want to. You don't have to have the paragraph description if you don't want to. You can remove whatever you want. The important thing is that you're including some kind of a title, whether it's text or an image, and that you are including that single button, which is the part we're going to get to next. So within this template, we have a couple different things going on. The main div gives us the spacing around the entire header hero image. So this allows us to make the padding around the hero, the title and things like that, set it away from the header of the page, that kind of a thing. And those are adjustable as well, those paddings and things. You can make your hero a little bit shorter if you want, or a bit taller, that kind of thing. In this case, we have just the default settings that come with the template. So we've got our grid container that's holding our grid item, that's holding our button. Here's the A tag. A tags are links in HTML. The href is actually where it's going to actually link to. So that's where you're going to put your link to the Classy registration page once we put it into the Classy campaign. The text over here, customizable button, this is the text that actually shows publicly on the button. So we're just going to change this real quick to register. Okay. And there are some CSS ways to make that all caps if you want, or you could just type it in all caps. For us, we do, our buttons are always in all caps. So, and you can see here the note says replace hashtag with your URL found by activating the Classy default hero, visiting the published page, and clicking on the tickets link. We'll do that when we actually upload this to Classy. So we're going to change our custom text here, and then that's the end of the HTML code because the next thing is the CSS styles. So this is all we need right here. Just this div tag to this div tag, where it starts and where it ends. So we're going to copy that, and we're going to pop that into Classy in here in a minute. Let's come down to the styles and take a look at the styles real quick. Again, the part that you actually need for Classy is just what's in between the style tags. Don't copy this and don't copy this into your CSS section. Your Classy campaign will throw an error. So inside this style section, we have a bunch of different things that are marked out for us. We've got web button styles. We've got text and layout formatting options. Whoops. We got text and layout formatting options. We've got layout styles. In this one in particular, we have the page hero. There are some mobile responsive grid options down here, but because this layout doesn't really use a mobile responsive grid for multiple columns, we've got it all set to pretty default standard sections. And it's mostly this page hero section that's actually modifying what's in the hero of a event page that we're doing like this. So up here you can see the main div has the BG image, background dash image class on it. And down here we define what that means. So for the class background image, we have a padding of 45% top. Remember, it's always top, right, bottom, left. And so in this case, we have 45% padding. Remember, padding is always inside the box. So padding is what happens when you add space inside of a div. Margin is what happens when you add space outside of a div. So in this case, we want to move the image and title and graphics and things away from the top of the frame. We want to move it away from the right and left edges of the frame. We want to make sure we have a little bit of padding off the bottom of the frame. So in this case, it's 45, 5%, 2%, and 5%. Now we do have media query here. Media queries are a little bit advanced for CSS. Media query basically says, what should the website do when the screen size is a certain width? And so in this case, when the screen size is a minimum width at 600 pixels or greater, then we want to change the background image class to have a different type of padding. And so here we've kept the other two styles the same, but in this case, at screen sizes with a minimum width of 600 pixels or greater, we want this style to apply and not the default one. So basically this is mobile first. So this is applying below 600 pixels, this is applying above 600 pixels. And that's how you modify your CSS to respond to a mobile device and make sure that the mobile device screen view looks the way it should. And so that's pretty much all that's happening with this design, this whole entire design. So if you wanted to change your button colors, you've got some button things up here you can change. For example, the default button color, sorry, the default button text color, because color always means text. This color always means text, defines the color, font color of the button. So the text is going to be white. When you hover over the button, the text will stay white, because for our brand, it's better for the text to stay white. And then we have this button primary and button primary hover, and that's where you edit the background color of the button and the hover background color of the button. So in this case, our default color is going to be this light blue, and our background color, when we hover over, it's going to be this dark blue. Now here, if your brand standards include things like a border around buttons, you can put a border, you can add a pixel or 2 or 5, whatever your styles are. Our buttons don't have any borders. And if you want to get more into and learn more about how these things work, just look up something like border CSS or border radius CSS. For example, our buttons never have rounded corners, but if you have rounded corners on your buttons, you might want to increase your border radius to, 5 or 10 pixels or something. So you want to make sure that you read up on how those things work, so that when you're editing the code, you're editing it in a way that actually works and your syntax stays correct. So these are, again, this is the styles for the button in its default state. This is the styles for the button when you hover over it in this row here. Down here we have some basic settings for our font styles, so you can have things like headings. We've got one for making your text white. If you want to change that, you can change the tags, for example. I like to have white text on top of a darker background image. It tends to be easier to see. But if your background image is pretty light, you might want to change that and make your text a different color. This is just a variable that you're calling up here. So if you don't want it to be white, then just make sure you change it here as well as here, and then change the actual color that you're referencing over here. Again, we got some other text styles. I won't go into every single one, but just suffice to say, make sure you change your font sizes if you want to change your font sizes or your heading sizes, that kind of thing, your colors of your headings, that kind of thing. That's where all your text and layout formatting options are going to be. Okay, so now we've got our styles, we've got our code, we've got this code block up here. Let's jump back into Classy and take a look at what it looks like when we put all this together. Okay, we're back in Classy, and we're back on that page, the landing page. We've clicked that Design tab over here. We've clicked on our custom block, and we've opened up the custom block. Now, from our HTML document we just had open, we're going to copy all of that HTML text. If you want to remove the notes, you're more than welcome to. Those are just there for your benefit, so you can describe things within the block and you can see what they're doing. If you don't want them in there, go ahead and delete them like this. And so we're just going to work with this because it's a little bit cleaner, it's a little bit easier to see. Now you can notice a few things straight away. One, we have one button, we have a text header, an image header, excuse me. We have an image header right here, and we have our modifications. We put it in Tuesday, November 8th, 2022, describe the event here. It's a fun event, register. And so over here in the code, just like what we had in our code editor, we have that main div that includes the image header, that heading 2, this one, the description and the paragraph tag, and then a div that holds our button and the grid item for the button, and then the actual link for the button. Now, notice, if you will, that the href is still a hashtag. That hashtag will basically make it reload the page every time you click it. So then this is not going to actually get us to our event registration. We need to go ahead and modify that. But before we go find that link, we're just going to do a couple of things to make this look a little nicer. For example, I'm not a big fan of how large this image is, the Day at Harvest Farm title. I think that should be a little bit smaller. So I'm going to come in here and modify the width of this image. So I'm going to go ahead and modify that down to 500 pixels instead of 700 pixels. Now let's boost it up to 550. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Let's go ahead and look at the CSS and just double check and make sure that we've, copied and pasted it there. Now, if we didn't actually paste it, it's going to look terrible because all those styles that make it work aren't there. And so this is what it looks like with no styles. You can see the button is really plain. All that padding that keeps it centered on the page is gone. Our text is not white like we need it to be able to read it on top of this background image. So if you paste your code in and it looks bad, check your CSS and make sure you've got all your CSS pasted in there. Now the real question is, how do we get this register button to work? Because it's not going to work by default. You're replacing the default code block that allows Classy to automatically sync your event to your event's registration page. So because you're automatically removing that, we need to take that link that normally would appear and put it in this button. So we're going to go ahead and hit Save and Update Page. And then we're going to go back. We're going to turn on that hero block again. So now we have this hero block is on. We're going to hit Save and Update Page one more time. And now we're going to go to the actual page. So we're going to hit Preview Landing Page. I've actually already got it open up here. I'm just going to hit Refresh because mine's showing a previous view of this page. Okay, so now we've got A Day at Harvest Farm, Tuesday, November 8th, right? And if we scroll down, this is the default hero, which is just a black background right now. What we need is the link to on this button. So if we click this button, it's going to take us to the registration page. And we need this URL right here. Now, I don't have this campaign published yet. So because it's not published yet, I'm still getting a classy.org URL. So you do want to make sure you publish your campaign first. Then do your hero, save it, go find the public page. And now once you're on your public page and you're not in a demo mode, right, you can see this big Classy Manager bar up here. It's telling me that I'm not published yet. If it's published, you won't see the preview equals true URL parameter. You won't even see that show up. Make sure you publish your campaign. Once it is, go to the actual page, grab that URL. Once you have that URL and it is to the published actual campaign, come back to your page editor. Go ahead and turn that hero off. We don't need it anymore. And then go to your custom block to edit it, this custom block here. Now, you want to edit the actual destination of that button, so go to the href of the button and paste that URL right in between those quotation marks. Save and update your page, and then go ahead and go back to your public page and refresh it, and you will see that the hero is updated. The button now links to that registration page. Now, if I click this, it's not going to work for me because this campaign is still in preview mode, so I'm going to get an error message from Classy. But if your campaign is published, you won't have that error message. So once you have that button in there and you have the link in there, go ahead and build the rest of your page and just have fun with it. Have a good time. And if you have any questions, always hit me up on robobogan.com. Again, all these layouts are available on my website. There's a blog post for each one. If you go check out the blog, there's a blog post, parts 1, 2, 3, and 4 all talk about these layout templates. And so it goes through a basic overview of what the code is doing, and then an actual overview of every single template. So we've got this hero template we just walked through. We've got this auto width column grid layout. So you have columns that are evenly the same width. And then you have this layout that has a fraction-based column width layout, where you have different columns that are different fractions of the page. And so feel free to walk through those. And then just a plug for a fun one. I like this one. A lot of people, if you're doing an event, like the campaign we just walked through, and you want people to be able to add that event to their calendar, you can create add to calendar buttons and links in for free without Classy, and then you can bring them into Classy and actually put them on your pages. And so your thank you page could feature an add to calendar button where somebody can just click on it and add it to their Outlook, add it to their Google Calendar, that kind of thing. This entire blog post walks you through the whole process, gives you some tips and tricks on how to do that. So if you're doing an event, I highly recommend that you take a look at that. You can put those links in Classy autoresponder emails as well. So registration emails, so when somebody gets a confirmation from registering, you can put that add to calendar link within that email as well. A little harder to do stylized buttons or images and things like that in the Classy confirmation email, but you can still do a plain text link and let people be able to add things to their calendar. And anything else that you might need in terms of photography for Classy, specifically this picture is worth $1,000. I highly recommend that one if you're having a hard time getting images to look right in Classy. And that's about it. So hope that was helpful, and hit me up if you have any questions.